The galaxy was vast, filled with light from a billion suns, but on the very edge where stars grew thin and cold, there was silence. A forgotten colony ship drifted there, its hull scarred, its engines dead, its crew long vanished into history. For centuries it had floated in the void, a ghost among stars, until suddenly its systems flickered to life. Old machinery groaned, lights sputtered weakly, and then from its broken antenna, a pulse began to spread. It was a signal, a cry for help, but it was not like any distress beacon the galaxy had ever heard. It did not follow the clean patterns of modern codes, nor the simple tones of outdated warnings. It carried a rhythm that felt wrong, almost alive, and behind the static there was a voice. The words were harsh, deep, and impossible to translate, yet every species that intercepted it felt the same reaction. A cold shiver crawling up their spine, an ancient instinct warning them that something dangerous had spoken. The first to hear it was a small patrol fleet belonging to the Kellner Dominion, a reptilian species proud of their order and discipline. Their comm officers froze as the sound played across the bridge, their scales tightening, their jaws clenched. The commander demanded a report, but no one could explain why their translators failed. The signal carried power beyond language, something primal that reached past technology and into instinct. The commander laughed it off at first, calling it a desperate cry from some forgotten backwater, but even as he spoke, his eyes darted toward the shadows of the bridge, as if he half expected something to crawl out of them. Other fleets picked it up too. The Vayari, a race of insectoids, heard the signal echo through their hive ships, and for the first time in memory their drones hesitated, antennae twitching nervously. The Routh, tall and gray-skinned with eyes adapted for darkness, listened in silence, their voices hushed as they admitted that the tone reminded them of old legends, stories told to frightened children about deathwelders who once roamed the stars. And then the Galactic Council itself received it. Inside their shining chamber, 1,000 delegates listened as the recording played on repeat. The air itself seemed to grow colder as the words rolled across the room, carrying no meaning yet heavy with dread. Some delegates demanded immediate investigation, calling it their duty to aid any world in need. Others whispered that it might be a trap, that the voice was not a plea but a challenge. An elder of the Sauruan species, their skin like translucent crystal, rose trembling to his feet and declared, This feels human." The chamber erupted into chaos at that word. Humanity, the name was a ghost. Official records spoke of their exile long ago, of their worlds burned, of their fleets scattered into dust. The council had erased them from history, but their shadow lingered in whispers, in the fear buried deep inside every species who once faced them in war. Could this signal mean they were back? The council silenced the elder quickly, dismissing his words as fearmongering. But even as they laughed, no one could deny that the signal felt wrong. The pulse continued to spread, bouncing from relay to relay, until soon half the galaxy had heard it. Entire civilian networks caught fragments, and ordinary people lay awake in their homes, hearing it replay in their minds like a nightmare. Children cried without knowing why. Soldiers on remote outposts checked their weapons twice, uneasy in the quiet of space. The distress signal was not just sound. It was a presence, an echo that dug itself into the mind. The Kellner Dominion dispatched their nearest fleet, convinced they would find a dying colony to claim and control. They laughed at the fear others felt, saying humans were extinct, their name just an old story. But as their warships crossed into the sector where the signal came from, things began to go wrong. Their sensors glitched, screens filled with static, and navigators reported shadows moving across the void where nothing should be. One ship reported a whisper over internal comms, words in that same unknown language, and then the line cut. When the commander demanded a status update, there was only silence. The ship was gone. No explosion, no wreckage, nothing. Just gone. The rest of the fleet pressed forward, but the laughter was gone from their voices. Their claws tapped nervously on consoles, their eyes flicking constantly to the dark. The signal grew louder as they approached its source, until it was no longer just sound. It was vibration in their bones, pressure in their skulls, like someone whispering directly into their minds. One of the younger officers collapsed, clutching his head, screaming that he could hear footsteps in the corridors even though the ship was sealed. The commander shouted for silence, but his voice cracked, betraying his fear. When they finally reached the drifting colony ship, they stared in disbelief. Its hull was broken, its surface scorched, its lights dim. It was ancient, a relic from centuries ago, yet its beacon pulsed with unnatural strength, far beyond what its decayed systems should allow. The fleet circled it cautiously, scanning for survivors, but their sensors gave only garbled returns, as if the ship itself resisted being read. The distress signal thundered across their comms again, louder now, and for the first time, some of them thought they could almost understand the words. They were not a plea. They were not begging. They were warning. One officer whispered shakily, "It's not calling for help. It's telling us to stay away." The commander silenced him, but in his own chest, his hearts pounded with the same realization. Across the galaxy, more fleets began to converge, pulled by the same curiosity, the same arrogance. Some believed they were about to find treasure. Others thought they would rescue a primitive species, but all of them carried the same unease, the same whisper of fear. Because though no one could explain it, everyone who heard that voice knew the same thing deep inside. Something was coming, and whatever it was not weak, it was not begging, and it was not afraid. The great chamber of the Galactic Council shimmered with light as thousands of species filled their seats, their voices rising in a storm of confusion. The distress signal was being replayed on the central holoscreen, and every time those harsh words echoed through the chamber, the atmosphere shifted. Some covered their ears with trembling hands, others hissed in anger, and a few simply stared into the glow with fear widening their eyes. The council floor, usually full of measured speeches and strict order, had turned into chaos. Delegates shouted over one another, their translators struggling to keep up as dozens of languages filled the air at once. The High Speaker, a tall Sauruan with crystal skin that caught the light like glass, slammed his staff against the floor, demanding silence, but even his command could not hold back the storm. One delegate from the scaled Kellner Dominion stood tall, his tail lashing the ground as he hissed. "It is nothing but a dying world crying for help. We are wasting time with fear. The Dominion has already dispatched ships to claim it." His words drew cheers from some allies, but others recoiled, muttering that such arrogance would lead to disaster. A Vayari envoy, her insect wings trembling, snapped back, "If it were a simple cry, why does every drone in my hive refuse to enter the sector? Why do even machines resist approaching it?" Her voice carried panic, and the silence that followed her words made clear that her fear was shared. Then, slowly, the elder of the Sauruan rose again, his crystalline body glowing faintly as though lit from within. His voice shook, but each word cut through the noise. "This voice, this tone. I have heard it once before, long ago, when I was young. It is human." The chamber froze. The word fell like a blade, and for a long moment no one spoke. Then the uproar exploded again, louder than before. Some shouted that humanity was dead, destroyed, erased from the stars centuries ago. Others whispered that this was proof the old stories were true, that the Deathwelders had never been fully wiped out, that they had waited in the dark for this very moment. The High Speaker struck his staff again, desperate for control, his voice booming, "The humans are gone. Their fleets destroyed, their colonies burned, their names struck from the records of the galaxy. This signal is not human." But even as he spoke, his crystal skin dimmed, betraying the unease he could not hide. Delegates argued fiercely, some insisting that they must respond and aid whoever called for help, others demanding that the sector be quarantined, that no one enter lest they wake something better left forgotten. Military leaders from across the galaxy debated in private corners, some eager to send fleets to claim territory, others hesitant, haunted by half-remembered tales their ancestors told of human wars. One grizzled general of the Routh, his grey skin wrinkled like worn stone, finally stood and addressed the chamber. "You all remember the Council's official records. They said humanity was gone. But my people fought them. I have seen human soldiers with my own eyes. They did not beg. They did not surrender. And if this voice is theirs, then I tell you now, they have returned." His voice sent a cold wave across the hall. The younger delegates, those who had grown up believing humans were just myths, stared wide-eyed, while the elders shifted uncomfortably, refusing to meet each other's gaze. Because deep down, in the hidden places of memory, they all knew the truth. The council had not destroyed humanity, they had only scattered them. The vote was called. Screens lit up as delegates cast their choices, and tension filled the chamber like a storm about to break. Would they send fleets to investigate, or would they lock down the sector and pray the signal faded? The results appeared in shining light above the chamber. Majority approval for a reconnaissance mission. Relief washed over some, but others trembled. A single mission was all it would take to unleash something they might not be able to contain. The High Speaker announced, his voice unsteady despite its volume. The Council will send a united fleet. We will uncover the truth of this signal. And if necessary, we will silence it. Yet even as he spoke, the signal pulsed again through the chamber, louder than before, filling the walls with that alien voice. And every delegate, no matter how brave their words, felt the same chill inside, the fear that the Council was not about to silence anything. They were about to wake it. The Council's vote had been made, and within days, the first response fleet was assembled. 24 ships, their hulls gleaming in the light of distant suns, gathered like hunters preparing for an easy kill. The commanders of these ships carried themselves with arrogance, their voices full of confidence as they broadcast speeches to their crews. They spoke of duty, of rescuing some lost world, of proving the Council's strength to silence the whispers of fear. But beneath those words lay another truth. They thought this mission would be simple, a chance to claim territory or salvage ancient tech from a forgotten wreck. The fleet moved out of Council space, their engines cutting across the void with trails of burning light, the signal guiding them deeper into the silent edge of the galaxy. At first the journey felt ordinary. Crews laughed in their mess halls, commanders traded bets on what they might find, and soldiers sharpened their weapons more out of boredom than necessity. But the further they went, the stranger it became. Their sensors, usually flawless, began to flicker with static. Navigation charts shifted slightly, as if the stars themselves were not where they should be. Communications between ships grew patchy, voices crackling with distortion, words breaking apart into fragments before reaching their destinations. At first, the commanders brushed it off as interference from the signal. But soon, the crews began to notice something else: shadows on the monitors. A technician aboard the Vayari frigate swore she saw movement on her screen, shapes walking across the hull, though the ship floated in empty space. On a Routh warcruiser, soldiers reported hearing footsteps echoing down the halls at night, though the corridors were empty. One by one, the men and women of the fleet grew restless, their laughter fading, their confidence turning into nervous whispers. The closer they came to the source of the signal, the louder it grew, until it was no longer something they heard only through machines. It throbbed in their bones, a low pulse that seemed to crawl into their skulls. The translators still could not decode it, but some began to believe they could almost understand it. A few muttered that it was not a cry for help at all. It was a warning, telling them to turn back. The commanders silenced such talk, threatening punishment for spreading fear, but their own voices cracked when they gave orders, their hands shaking as they pointed to the forward stars. Then the first ship vanished. One moment it was there, cruising in formation, its engines burning bright. The next, its lights flickered, its comms spat out a broken scream, and then, nothing. No explosion, no wreckage, no trace. Just gone. Panic rippled through the fleet. Orders shouted across channels dissolved into static. Some ships broke formation, scanning desperately for wreckage, but found only the cold void. On one cruiser, an officer whispered, "It didn't explode. It was taken." His commander struck him down with a sharp blow, shouting that fear was the enemy, but in his eyes, the same terror flickered. The fleet pressed on, though silence now filled their halls. Gone were the songs of soldiers, the laughter of crews. Now only the hum of machines and the endless, pulsing signal remained. When at last the colony ship came into view, the crews gasped. It was massive, far larger than their own vessels, its hull torn and broken, its body drifting like a corpse in the dark. Fires had long since burned out, leaving only scorched metal. Entire sections were missing, as if ripped away by claws the size of buildings. Yet through all this ruin, the signal pulsed stronger than ever, bursting from its broken antenna with a power that defied reason. The fleet circled it cautiously, their scanners struggling to read its interior. The readings twisted, showing life signs where none should be, then vanishing, then reappearing in impossible places. One ship reported thousands of signatures deep inside the wreck, but when they zoomed in, they were gone. Another reported footsteps echoing on its own hull, though no one was outside. The commanders ordered boarding teams to prepare, their voices thin and brittle despite their attempts at control. Crews strapped on armor, loaded their rifles, and glanced at each other with wide eyes. No one wanted to be the first to step aboard, but orders left no choice. As the first boarding pods launched, the signal screamed louder than ever, rattling metal, shaking bones, and driving several crew members to their knees. Some whispered through trembling lips what many had already begun to fear. The signal was not a cry for help. It was bait. Boarding pods locked onto the broken hull of the colony ship with a heavy metallic thud, their clamps biting into ancient steel. Soldiers inside shifted nervously, their helmets hiding pale faces and twitching eyes. The countdown ticked across their visors, and with a hiss, the doors opened. Darkness greeted them, a black so thick even their lights seemed to vanish into it. The first boots touched metal, echoing too loudly in the silence. The corridors stretched out like the bones of a carcass, torn wires hanging like veins, walls scorched by long-dead fires. Dust floated in the air, disturbed for the first time in centuries, yet it felt warm, as if the ship itself still breathed. The soldiers advanced slowly, their rifles raised, their lights scanning. At first, they saw nothing but ruin. Empty rooms, shattered consoles, broken glass crunching underfoot. But then came the details that unsettled them. Strange marks etched into the walls, claw-like gouges, deep and deliberate. Dried streaks that looked too much like blood. And shadows that didn't belong, moving at the edges of their vision. One soldier swore he heard whispers behind him, but when he turned, there was only the empty corridor stretching into blackness. The commander barked orders to stay focused, his voice steady but his hands shaking slightly on his weapon. As they pushed deeper into the ship, they found signs of life long extinguished. Bunk rooms with beds torn apart, mess halls with trays still on the tables, as if people had left mid-meal. The air was stale but carried faint traces of something sharp, metallic, almost like rusted iron. The deeper they went, the louder the distress signal grew, not through their comms but through the very walls, a vibration that rattled their bones. The sound no longer felt like machinery. It felt alive. One team reached the central chamber, where the beacon itself pulsed. A massive console stood in the middle, cracked and sparking, yet still transmitting with impossible strength. Cables ran across the floor like roots of a tree, their ends buried deep into the ship's structure. A technician moved forward to scan it, but froze. His visor showed life signs all around them, hundreds of them, flickering in and out like ghosts. The readings were impossible, vanishing as quickly as they appeared, then flaring again somewhere else. Panic spread through the squad. Soldiers whispered frantically over comms, their voices overlapping, some claiming they saw movement ahead, others swearing they heard footsteps behind. The commander ordered silence, but even he was sweating inside his helmet. And then, in one dark corner, a soldier's light caught something. A figure. Human. A body slumped against the wall, armor cracked, a skeletal hand gripping a weapon that had long since gone cold. The soldier stepped closer, and suddenly the visor readings exploded, thousands of life signs surging across the ship. Screams filled the comms as lights flickered, corridors shifting like the ship itself was alive. Somewhere deep below, a sound echoed, not mechanical but human, a heavy, ragged breath followed by the creak of metal boots on steel floors. The soldiers froze, their weapons trembling in their hands. The technician whispered, voice breaking, "The beacon. It isn't just sending a signal. It's feeding on us. It knows we're here." The words barely left his lips when every light on the ship flickered and died. Darkness swallowed them whole, and the distress signal roared louder than ever. no longer just sound but a voice speaking directly into their minds. It was not pleading. It was commanding. And every alien in that broken ship realized the truth too late. The dead world was not dead. It was waiting. The colony ship groaned like a beast stirring in its sleep as the alien squads pushed deeper, their footsteps echoing too loudly in the vast hollow corridors. The beacon's pulse rattled in their chests now, every vibration like a second heartbeat forcing itself into their bodies. Soldiers whispered over comms that they felt watched, as though unseen eyes followed them through every shadow. Then they found the chamber. The doors were massive, sealed with layers of rust, yet the moment their torches touched the panels, they slid open with a low screech, as if the ship itself wanted them inside. What lay beyond silenced even the most arrogant among them. A cavernous hall stretched out, lined wall to wall with towering glass pods. Hundreds, maybe thousands, stacked in rows like the tombs of giants. Frost clung to the glass, mist curling in the stale air, and inside the pods were shapes, human shapes. Figures locked in stasis, their bodies perfectly preserved, armored in strange gear that looked both ancient and advanced. Some pods flickered with faint lights, others stood dead and dark, their inhabitants nothing but dust. The aliens froze, their lights sweeping across the chamber. The commander's voice cracked as he ordered scans, but the technicians shook their heads wildly, life signs everywhere, fluctuating so fast their systems could not process it. The distress signal thundered louder, as if the beacon itself was feeding on their presence. Then one of the pods hissed. The sound was soft at first, a whisper of gas escaping, but it echoed through the chamber like a scream. Frost began to melt from the glass. The soldier inside twitched. His hand moved. His eyes snapped open. They were human eyes, but they glowed faintly, burning with something no alien had ever seen. Defiance sharpened into fire. The pod cracked open with a hiss of vapor, and the man stepped out, towering above the soldiers, his armor scarred yet intact, his breath heavy like a predator waking from a long sleep. The aliens raised their weapons in panic, voices screaming over comms, but none of them fired. Something in the humans' gaze froze them in place, a weight pressing down on their instincts, a primal terror they could not explain. The human tilted his head slowly, scanning the creatures before him, and then he spoke. His voice was deep, guttural, in a language their translators tried and failed to decode. The words came through as static, broken, but the tone was clear. It was not a plea. It was not gratitude. It was a warning. More hissing filled the air. All around them, pods began to stir. Lights flickered back to life, ancient machinery awakening from its endless sleep. Rows of humans twitched, their fists clenching, their eyes opening one by one, glowing in the shadows. The aliens screamed, some stumbling back toward the doors, but they slammed shut with a metallic thud. The commander barked for calm, but his voice was lost under the rising noise of awakening soldiers. The first human took a step forward, his boots slamming against the deck like thunder, and every alien felt the weight of that sound in their bones. Another pod burst open, then another, until the chamber was alive with steam and the sound of cracking glass. Dozens of humans emerged, each armed with weapons that hummed faintly with energy no alien recognized. The first soldier raised his rifle, not in fear but in defiance, and his eyes locked on the commander. The translator finally caught a fragment of his words, just 3 broken syllables, but they made the alien's blood run cold. "We are back." The moment the first human soldier stepped out of the pod, the colony ship was no longer dead. It was alive, breathing, and hungry. The beacon's pulse became a roar, shaking the walls, rattling the alien soldiers until their bones ached. Their helmets filled with overlapping screams as pods cracked open all around them. Frost shattered, glass fell in pieces, and one by one, humans emerged. Each carried scars of centuries of battle, their armor mismatched with both primitive steel and strange technology fused together, as if they had evolved in war while the galaxy forgot them. Their eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, not with machines but with raw defiance. Alien soldiers raised their rifles, hands trembling, orders flying in panic through comms, but no one fired. Instinct screamed louder than training. Every species had legends buried in their past, Stories told to frighten children about the humans, about the Deathworlders who could fight where no one else could survive. And now those legends stood in front of them, breathing, alive, stronger than memory. The first human's voice thundered again, incomprehensible yet heavy with intent. Translators stuttered and failed, but fragments slipped through, fragments like war, awake, ours. The aliens stepped back, bumping into each other, their formation shattering. Then it began. The humans moved with terrifying precision. They did not hesitate. They did not question. They struck. A squad of humans tore through the first alien team with speed that defied belief. Bullets cracked, blades flashed, and armored fists slammed into alien bodies with the weight of hammers. Soldiers screamed as their comms filled with static, their helmets displaying nothing but red warnings. Within minutes, the boarding team that had entered the chamber was gone. Scattered, broken, silenced. On the ships outside, commanders shouted desperately into their comms, demanding status updates. What came back were screams, static, and the last words of dying soldiers. Then the humans turned outward. Their captured consoles lit up, alien systems bending to their will with unnatural ease. The colony ship, once dead, powered to life, its engines growling awake as if the void itself had given it strength. Lights surged across its ruined hull, weapons that should not have worked sparked back into power, and the beacon shifted frequency. Now it was no longer a call. It was a command, a signal reaching into the alien fleet like claws. Panic erupted across the formation. Crews reported strange voices in their ships, whispers in human tongues that translators could not block. Doors locked by themselves, engines sputtered, and entire systems went dark as if seized by an unseen hand. One destroyer lit up with gunfire, but its cannons were not aimed outward, they were aimed at its own escorts. In seconds, 2 council ships burned, destroyed not by humans boarding them but by their own ally under human control. Officers screamed that their ships were being hijacked. Some begged for retreat, but the command chain collapsed. Pride had brought them here, but pride could not save them. The first human warship rose from the wreck like a ghost wearing stolen skin, its hull patched with alien steel, its engines burning brighter than anything the Council had seen in centuries. It was not sleek, it was not clean. It was brutal, jagged, built for one purpose: war. The Council fleet broke formation, some trying to fire, others fleeing. But every shot that struck the human-controlled ship was answered with a fury that dwarfed it. Alien captains realized in horror what the truth was. The distress call had not been for help. It had been bait, a lure cast into the stars, waiting for them to come, waiting for prey to step willingly into the trap. And now the trap had snapped shut. Across the fleet, soldiers whispered the word none dared to speak aloud in the council halls. Humans. It spread like a curse, a name long buried but now alive again, burning through every ship, every terrified crew member. Humanity had awakened. And in that moment, every alien realized the nightmare of their ancestors was no legend. It was real, and it had just begun. The void outside the colony ship lit up with chaos. Alien fleets that had arrived full of pride now broke apart like frightened birds, their formation shattered, their voices across comms nothing but screams and broken orders. In the middle of it all, the dead ship that should have been a ruin burned with life. Its engines flared, its weapons that had slept for centuries roared awake, and human soldiers controlled them as if they had never forgotten how. Alien captains shouted for retreat, some ordering their ships to fire on the colony vessel. But it was too late. The humans struck first. Boarding pods, crude but fast, launched from hidden bays in the wreck. They slammed into the nearest council cruiser with a force that bent steel, their doors exploding outward as human soldiers poured inside. They did not move like men waking from centuries of sleep. They moved like predators, precise and merciless. Alien defenders tried to hold the corridors, their rifles blazing, but the humans moved through them with terrifying speed. Every bullet found a target, every strike dropped an enemy. They fought not for survival but with the certainty of hunters reclaiming territory that already belonged to them. Within minutes, the cruiser's bridge was silent. Its captain slumped lifeless over his console. Alarms wailed as systems shifted, then flickered, then turned against the very fleet they once served. Council ships screamed over comms as their allies suddenly opened fire on them, its cannons shredding through hulls with brutal efficiency. The humans had not only captured the ship, they had mastered it. Panic spread faster than the fire tearing through broken vessels. Some ships tried to flee, their engines burning bright as they turned away, but the humans were already ahead of them. More pods launched, targeting stragglers, overwhelming them one by one. Every ship lost became a weapon in human hands, twisted and turned back against its former allies. Alien commanders begged the Council for reinforcements, their voices desperate, but the truth was clear. The fleet was no longer fighting humans. It was being consumed by them. On the Routh dreadnought, one officer stared wide-eyed at his monitors, whispering to no one, "They aren't survivors, they are conquerors." His captain barked for silence, ordering full firepower, but even their most powerful cannons seemed useless. The human-controlled ships did not fight like the Council's fleets. They fought with chaos, unpredictability, striking weak points no one else dared target. Engines, reactors, life support. Within minutes, the dreadnought that had once stood as a symbol of Council power was burning, its crew abandoning ship into the cold void where no one would save them. Across the alien armada, fear spread like a plague. Soldiers abandoned posts, technicians wept as systems failed, captains fought to control crews that no longer obeyed. But through it all, the humans advanced with ruthless calm, as if every move had been planned long ago, as if they had been waiting for this very war. The beacon pulsed again, its signal stronger than ever, now not only calling but broadcasting to the galaxy. It was no longer a distress call. It was a declaration. The humans had struck, and the galaxy was watching. In council chambers far away, delegates listened to fragmented transmissions, screams, explosions, and one single word repeated again and again by terrified survivors: humans. The high speaker sat frozen in his crystal chair, his skin dimming as the truth he had denied now burned across every frequency. Humanity had not only survived. They had taken the first strike, and it was devastating. On the edge of the void, among burning wreckage and drifting corpses, human war banners flickered onto stolen screens, their symbols crude but unmistakable. The Death Welders had returned to war. And this was only the beginning. The transmissions spread faster than light itself. Across the galaxy, civilian networks, military relays, and even black market channels all carried the same horrifying fragments. Screams of dying crews, the thunder of explosions, and one single word repeated with terror in every voice: humans. In distant colonies, children asked their parents what the word meant, and the parents, pale and trembling, told them it was nothing more than an old story. But the elders who remembered the whispers of their ancestors knew the truth. They shut their doors, prayed in silence, and whispered that the nightmare had returned. In the council chamber, chaos reigned. Delegates pounded their tables, their translators crackling as 100 languages shouted at once. Some demanded immediate retaliation, to send the full might of the council's fleets. Others screamed for retreat, for sealing the sector, for cutting off all access before the contagion spread further. The high speaker slammed his staff against the floor, his crystal body trembling, but his voice could not silence the storm. For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Council had no control. Panic was spreading faster than authority. Reports poured in from scattered fleets, ships hijacked, commanders missing, soldiers refusing to fight. Even machines, the most loyal of all, glitched and faltered under the beacon's pulse, their circuits seizing as if the signal carried not only sound but command. The word Death Welders returned to official tongues, dragged from dusty archives where it had been buried. Generals muttered of the old wars, the battles where entire alien armadas had been torn apart by human fleets that fought with ferocity no simulation could ever capture. Now those same generals, their scales, skins, and carapaces all pale with fear, whispered that the humans had not only returned but had learned. The Council was no longer facing a broken enemy. They were facing predators who had waited in silence and sharpened their claws in the dark. On frontier worlds, fear spread like fire. Merchants shut down their stalls, colonists abandoned outposts, and smugglers refused to travel near the sector where the signal pulsed. Soldiers in distant garrisons muttered that if the council sent them there, they would refuse to go. On hive ships of the Vayari, entire broods refused to respond to commands, huddling together with their antennae trembling, instinct screaming what logic tried to deny. In the Routh strongholds, where stone-carved walls had stood for ages, warriors who had never known fear sat in silence, sharpening blades with shaking hands as they remembered the stories of humans breaking their armies long ago. And in the halls of the Sauruan, the crystal-skinned species who had once fought closest to humanity, the elders stood weeping openly, their glowing bodies dimmed. One of them spoke before the council, his voice a whisper yet carrying more weight than all the shouting. We thought them gone. We thought fire erased them. But fire only forges stronger steel. You all know what this means. The war we buried in lies is coming back to us. His words left the chamber in silence for a brief moment, until the arguing began again, louder, more desperate. Some still tried to cling to arrogance, insisting the humans could be crushed once more with united fleets. But their words were weak, their voices cracking. Others, more honest, admitted what everyone felt but none wanted to say. Humanity's first strike had already broken the balance. They had turned council weapons against the council itself, seized ships with terrifying speed, and broadcast their name across the stars. The galaxy was no longer laughing at old myths. The galaxy was afraid. In the shadows beyond the council halls, ordinary people whispered that this was only the beginning. The humans had not revealed their full strength yet. If the distress signal had been a trap, then what lay beyond it? How many more fleets were hidden in the void? Waiting? And as the beacon pulsed again, stronger than ever, its voice thundered across the stars, no longer distorted but clear, no longer a mystery but a promise. We are awake. The colony ship's beacon thundered through the stars, its voice no longer distorted, its words sharper now, cutting into every transmission. Across the galaxy, even those who wanted to deny it could no longer escape the truth. Humanity had spoken. Humanity had returned. On the edge of the void, where the first response fleet had been reduced to wreckage and silence, new lights flared in the darkness. At first the remaining alien ships thought it was reinforcement, perhaps council fleets finally arriving to save them. But then the shapes emerged from the black, and every hope turned into terror. Warships. Dozens, then hundreds, sliding out of the shadows like predators. Their designs were nothing like the sleek, delicate lines of council vessels. These ships were brutal, angular, built for function not beauty, their hulls scarred with battles fought in secret. Some looked stitched together from alien wreckage, others gleamed with new alloys no one recognized, but all of them carried the same mark, the flag of Earth, crude but burning on their sides. The survivors of the alien fleet gasped, their comms filling with broken voices. Impossible, one whispered. They were destroyed. They were gone. But the truth was written in the stars before them. Earth had rebuilt. While the galaxy laughed at their exile, while history books erased their name, humanity had sharpened its claws. Hidden in the void, far from the council's eyes, they had prepared. And now they were here. The human-controlled colony ship turned slowly, its beacon silencing as if it had served its purpose. The trap was complete. The new fleet formed around it in perfect formation, their engines humming in unison, their weapons glowing faintly with power. Across alien channels, commanders begged for retreat, their voices shaking, but retreat was no longer possible. The humans broadcast a message across every frequency, their words carried in 1,000 tongues by translators that had once failed to decode them. This time there was no static. This time the words were clear. We were never gone. We were watching. And now we are here to collect what you owe. The statement hit the council like a hammer. Debt. It was a word that carried more weight than war, for everyone remembered the truth hidden beneath centuries of lies. The galaxy had not spared humanity. They had betrayed them, united against them, burned their colonies, crushed their fleets. And humanity had not forgotten. Every alien soldier, every captain, every delegate in the council chamber felt the same cold realization. This was not a plea for help. This was judgment. The human fleet advanced. Their weapons fired in unison, beams of light that tore through alien steel as if it were paper. Ships exploded one after another, their screams vanishing into static as the void lit up like a storm. The Council, watching from safe distance, scrambled to call reinforcements, but deep down, they already knew the truth. This was not a battle. This was the return of Earth's wrath. And wrath was not something that could be reasoned with. Across the galaxy, civilians wept, leaders argued, and soldiers prayed as whispers spread. Humanity was no longer an echo of the past. They were a storm, alive and relentless, and they had only just begun their march. On one captured cruiser, a human commander stood tall on the bridge, his scarred armor glowing under red lights. He looked at the stars ahead, his voice calm but heavy with fire. They thought they erased us. They thought exile would break us. But exile only gave us time. And now the galaxy will remember our name. The fleet moved forward, their shadows stretching across the void, and in every alien heart, from the smallest colony to the mightiest council chamber, one truth echoed like thunder. Earth had risen again, and its vengeance was unstoppable. The galaxy trembled. Not in silence, not in whispers, but in open chaos that spread like fire across the stars. News of the human fleet's return reached every corner of known space, carried by broken distress signals, panic transmissions, and the fearful voices of survivors who had seen what no one believed possible. Entire civilizations froze at the sound of the name. Merchants abandoned their routes, colonies barricaded themselves, and soldiers who once marched with pride now refused to leave their posts. In the council chamber, the delegates no longer shouted in arrogance. Their voices shook, their bodies trembled, and for the first time in living memory, no one pretended to be brave. The High Speaker's crystal body was dim, cracks spreading through his form like fractures of fear. He struck his staff, demanding silence, but his command carried no power. The truth was larger than his authority, larger than any law the Council had ever written. Humanity was back, and no vote, no decree, no alliance could stop what had already begun. Across the void, the human fleet advanced. They did not send endless speeches or demands. They did not ask for negotiation or apology. Their silence was more terrifying than threats. Only one message echoed again and again across all frequencies, translated into every language of the galaxy with cold precision. We remember. Those words were heavier than weapons, heavier than fire. Because every species knew what humanity remembered: betrayal, exile, the burning of their colonies, the destruction of their fleets. The Council had buried the past, but Earth had carried it like steel in their bones, forging their pain into weapons no one could match. And now the galaxy was paying the price. Alien fleets that tried to resist were crushed, their ships turned into fire in minutes. Those who surrendered were shown no mercy. Humans boarded their vessels, took their weapons, and left their wreckage drifting like warnings in the dark. Whole sectors went silent as human banners appeared on stolen screens, their crude symbols spreading across the stars like a plague. On frontier worlds, children who had never seen a human cried out in terror when the name was spoken. On ancient worlds, where monuments to old wars still stood, citizens wept because the stories told by their ancestors had come true. And in the council halls, where power once felt eternal, leaders wept openly, knowing the galaxy they had built was crumbling. But the worst was not the destruction. It was the realization that this was not humanity's full strength. The fleet that had returned was only the beginning, a fragment of what had been hidden in the dark. Rumors spread that more were coming, that Earth itself had become a fortress. A world reborn into something greater than the galaxy could imagine. The distress signal had not been just bait. It had been an announcement, a declaration that the age of hiding was over, and the age of vengeance had begun. In one last broadcast, heard by every world, every fleet, and every trembling soldier, a human commander's voice cut through the void. His words were simple, but they carried the weight of thunder. You thought we were gone. You thought we were weak. But we are Deathworlders, and we have returned to claim the stars. Silence followed, broken only by the roar of engines and the fire of war. Entire systems shook as the humans advanced, their shadows stretching across the galaxy, unstoppable, undeniable. The council collapsed into fear, worlds bent their knees, and the galaxy realized what it had awoken. Humanity, the forgotten nightmare, was no longer a whisper. They were wrath itself, and the galaxy would never be the same.